My name is Sarah, and I'm 16 years old. A year ago, I would have told you that Christianity was nothing more than a story for people who couldn't handle reality. I used to sit in the back of the church sanctuary, counting the floor tiles and waiting for the final prayer so I could go back to my real life. I thought faith was an old tradition that had nothing to do with a girl like me living in the modern world. I wasn't a bad person, but I lived as if God was a ghost in a book, not a living person I would ever have to answer to. I saw religion as a fairy tale, something people use to feel better about the world, like a soft story you tell a child so they aren't afraid of the dark. To me, it felt like a heavy weight of rules that didn't make sense, and I spent my Sundays dreaming of being anywhere else. I honestly believed that once we died, that was it. The lights just went out, and there was nothing left but silence. That changed on a Saturday afternoon in the summer of 2025, during a climbing trip that was supposed to be the highlight of my year. The sun was hot against the granite as I reached for a hold I thought was solid. I remember the smell of the dry pine needles and the sound of my own breathing, heavy and rhythmic. I felt strong, like I could conquer anything. I reached up, my fingers searching for a grip in a narrow crack in the stone. I found what felt like a sturdy ledge. I shifted my weight, pulling myself upward. But in that split second, the world fell apart. I remember the sound of the rock snapping, a sharp, dry crack, and then the terrifying rush of air. I didn't even have time to scream. The ground rushed up to meet me, and everything went black. In an instant, the weight of my body was gone. The heavy, crushing pain I expected never arrived. Instead, I felt a lightness that I can't describe in human words. I wasn't on the mountain anymore. I wasn't in my body. I was standing in a place where the light felt like it had a heartbeat. It wasn't just bright, it was pure, and it felt like home. And then I saw him. Meeting Jesus wasn't like the paintings I had seen hanging in the church hallways. Standing before him, I felt completely exposed. Like every selfish thought and every lie I'd ever told was written on my skin. I remembered the times I had mocked people for believing in him. I remembered the times I had been mean to my parents or ignored someone who was hurting just because I was too busy with my own life. I felt a deep, honest shame for how I had ignored him. I felt naked in my soul, and I wanted to hide, to crawl into a hole and disappear because I realized how small and wrong I had been. But I couldn't look away from his eyes. They were filled with a love that was so heavy it almost hurt, a love that knew everything about me, every dark corner of my heart, and still wanted me. It was a love that didn't need me to be perfect. It just wanted me to be his. My fear vanished as he reached out his hand. His touch felt like peace flowing through my veins. He didn't speak with a voice that came from the air. He spoke straight into my soul. And suddenly, the fairy tale I had mocked became the most real thing I had ever experienced. He told me that he was sending me back to warn everyone because the window of time is closing faster than anyone realizes. He didn't show me my past sins or the mistakes I had made. He knew I could see them now in his light. Instead, he began to show me what is happening right now and what is about to happen in the very month we are living in. The transition into the visions was seamless. It was like the light around us shifted and became a window into the world I had just left behind. In the first vision, Jesus showed me the date January 11th, 2026. I saw thousands of people in cities all over the world. From the tallest skyscrapers to the smallest houses, I could see through the walls. I saw families sitting at dinner tables together, but they were completely alone. Every person had a glowing screen in their hand or a device in front of them. I saw a dark, gray mist rising from these screens, wrapping around their hearts like thick, thorny vines. This mist wasn't just light or electricity. It was a spiritual fog. I watched as children sat next to their mothers, but the mother couldn't see the sadness in her child's eyes because she was lost in the glow of her phone. I saw fathers ignoring their families to chase after images and words that didn't matter. People were losing the ability to love or even see the person standing right in front of them. Jesus looked at me and his face was filled with a deep sadness. He said, "The world is starving for my presence, yet they fill their bellies with wind. They have replaced the breath of life with a flicker of light that cannot warm them. On this day, the great disconnect will deepen. People will feel a hunger they cannot name, and they will try to feed it with more noise, more images, and more distractions. But the more they eat, the emptier they will become. Tell them to look up, for their life is not found in the glow of a machine, but in the breath I gave them. Tell them to see the souls I have placed beside them before the silence becomes permanent. As the vision continued, I saw the mist getting thicker. It started to spread from the homes into the streets. I saw people walking past each other like ghosts. They weren't looking at the sky. They weren't looking at the trees. They were staring down at their palms. I saw the spiritual vines tightening around their chests, making it harder for them to breathe. It was as if they were being pulled into a world that wasn't real, leaving their true lives to rot. Jesus showed me that this wasn't just a habit. It was a trap. The enemy was using the noise to drown out the still, small voice that leads people back to God. Then the scene shifted. Jesus took me to a place that looked like a vast desert, but instead of sand, the ground was covered in discarded mirrors. Each mirror showed a person looking at themselves, fixing their hair, adjusting their smiles, and trying to look perfect for an audience that wasn't there. I saw how much energy they spent on their appearance while their spirits were withered and dry like dead grass. Jesus pointed to one woman who was crying while she took a photo of herself smiling. She seeks the approval of strangers while she rejects the love of her Creator, he told me. She is building a house out of shadows. I felt his grief as he showed me young people, kids my age, who were so overwhelmed by the pressure to be something they weren't, that they were thinking about giving up on life altogether. They felt like they didn't fit into the world they saw online. And because they didn't know Jesus, they didn't know they were already loved beyond measure. I wanted to reach out and tell them, to scream that the light in their hands was a lie, but I could only watch as the gray mist continued to coil around them. The vision expanded, and I saw the churches. Even there, the mist was present. I saw people sitting in pews, checking their watches, thinking about what they were going to do as soon as the service was over. Their bodies were in the building, but their hearts were miles away, caught in the same vines I had seen in the homes. They were going through the motions, singing songs they didn't mean, and praying prayers that didn't leave the room. Jesus looked at the leaders and the people and said, "They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They have made my house a place of routine instead of a place of encounter." I saw a young man in the back row of a church, his head bowed. At first, I thought he was praying, but then I saw he was just staring at his phone, hidden beneath his Bible. He was looking at things he shouldn't be looking at, even in the house of God. The vines around his heart were turning black, stinging him, but he was so numb, he didn't even feel it. Jesus didn't look at him with anger, but with a longing that broke my heart. "I died to set him free from those chains," he whispered, "but he clings to them as if they are gold." The visions began to move faster. I saw the weather changing across the earth. I saw storms that didn't look natural, clouds that were dark and heavy with a spiritual weight. I saw people running for cover from the rain, but they weren't running to God. They were running to their own inventions, their own bank accounts, and their own strength. They thought they could outrun the change that was coming to the world. I saw the earth itself groaning, like a person in labor, waiting for something to happen. Jesus showed me that the physical world is tied to the spiritual world. As people turned further away from the light, the world was becoming darker and more chaotic. I saw a vision of a great clock. It didn't have numbers. It only had a few grains of sand left at the top. The sand was falling slowly, one grain at a time, but the pile at the bottom was nearly at the top. Every grain represented a soul, a moment, a chance to turn back. I watched a single grain fall, and as it hit the bottom, I saw a person on earth breathe their last breath. Some went into the light, but so many others were swept away into a darkness that felt like an endless void. They looked surprised, as if they had never expected their time to end. They had lived as if they would stay on earth forever. Jesus turned to me again, his presence filling the entire space. "You see the hunger, Sarah. You see the fog. They are choosing the shadow over the substance. This is why you must go back. You must tell them that the disconnect is not just a social problem. It is a spiritual death." January 11th will be a mark, a day when the choice becomes clearer for many. Will they look up, or will they continue to fade away into the gray? I felt the weight of his words. I realized that my own life had been part of that gray mist just a few months ago. I had been one of those people staring at a screen, ignoring the voice of the one who made me. I felt a surge of love for the people I was seeing, a desire to wake them up, to shake them and tell them that there is so much more than this. I saw that the love Jesus has for the world is not a distant, cold feeling. It is a burning fire that wants to consume everything that is hurting us. The light around us intensified, and the first vision began to fade, but the feeling of the thorns and the mist stayed with me. I knew that what I had seen was only the beginning of what he wanted to show me. The air felt heavy with the importance of the message. I realized that the fairy tale was the world I had left behind, and this place with Jesus and these visions of truth was the only reality that mattered. The light around Jesus didn't just stay one color. It pulsed with every word he spoke, as if the very air was breathing with his life. After the vision of the gray mist and the screens, I felt a deep sense of urgency. I wanted to stay there in his peace forever, but he had more to show me. The scene shifted again, and the ground beneath us seemed to turn into a glass floor, looking down onto the earth as if we were standing above the clouds. Jesus pointed down, and I saw the date January 15th, 2026, appear in the atmosphere, written in a gold that shimmered like fire. I saw the great cities of the world, New York, London, Tokyo, Dubai. They looked like massive hives of activity. I saw people running from one meeting to another, checking their bank balances on their phones, and looking at their homes with pride. They were building their lives on things they could touch and see. They felt secure. They felt like they had built a world that couldn't be shaken. But as I watched, I saw the spiritual foundation beneath these cities. It wasn't made of rock or stone. It was made of sand. I saw massive towers of gold and glass that people had built, but they were leaning. Every time someone chose greed over kindness or their own comfort over the needs of the poor, the sand shifted. Jesus said to me, his voice sounding like the roar of a gentle ocean, "They have built their houses on the shifting earth. They think their wealth is a shield and their walls are a fortress. But on this day, the foundations will begin to groan. I am shaking what can be shaken so that they might look for the kingdom that cannot be moved." I saw a man in a high-rise office surrounded by stacks of paper and digital numbers. He looked successful, but I could see his heart. It was hollow, like a dry shell. He was terrified of losing what he had, and that fear was like a cold chain around his neck. He thought that if he just worked a little harder and gathered a little more, he would be safe. Jesus looked at him with such deep compassion and said, "He is trying to fill a hole that only I can inhabit. He believes his money is a savior, but it will not hear him when he cries out in the dark. Tell them that the things they possess will one day possess them if they do not lay them at my feet." The vision widened, and I saw a sudden tremor ripple through the spirits of people everywhere on that day. It wasn't an earthquake you could feel with your body, but a shudder in the soul. For a moment, everyone felt the fragility of their lives. I saw people pause in the middle of a street, looking around with a sudden sense of dread, as if they realized for the first time that everything they owned could vanish in a second. Most of them shook it off. They went back to their coffee, their work, and their plans. But some, just a few, dropped to their knees. They felt the shaking and realized they needed something solid to hold on to. Then, the scene changed again, moving forward in time. I saw the date January 20th, 2026. This vision was different. It didn't take place in the streets or the offices, but in the hearts of those who called themselves by his name. I saw a long, glowing line stretching across the entire earth. It wasn't a physical border, but a spiritual one. On one side of the line, the light was soft and warm. On the other, the shadows were growing long and cold. Jesus showed me people standing on this line. Many of them were trying to keep one foot on each side. I saw a woman who went to church every Sunday, sang the songs, and even taught a class. But during the week, her heart was full of gossip and pride. She wanted the comfort of Jesus, but the lifestyle of the world. She was standing right on the edge, swaying back and forth. The middle ground is disappearing, Jesus said, and his eyes were like flames of pure truth. The day of choosing is here. I would rather they be cold or hot, but because they are lukewarm, they are losing their way. On this day, the line will become a wall. Those who have not decided will find themselves on the side they did not intend. I watched as the line began to glow brighter, becoming like a high fence of fire. People who had been playing games with their faith were suddenly forced to move. I saw names in a massive, beautiful book, the Book of Life, and some of the names were fading. It wasn't because Jesus wanted them to go. It was because they were choosing the darkness so consistently that their connection to the light was snapping. I saw the names of people who had once been on fire for God, but they had let the cares of the world and the desire for more choke out their love. I cried out, "Jesus, can't they see? Can't they feel the heat of the fire?" He looked at me, and a tear fell from his eye, shining like a star. They have ears, but they do not hear. They have eyes, but they do not see, because they have covered them with the veil of their own desires. They want a version of me that does not ask for their heart, but I want all of them. I died for all of them, not just a part. On January 20th, the division will be made manifest. The hearts that are truly mine will shine like gold, and the hearts that are divided will begin to grow cold. I saw a young girl, maybe a little younger than me, sitting in her room. She was crying, holding a Bible she hadn't opened in months. She felt the pull of the world, the pressure to fit in, to be popular, to do things she knew were wrong. She looked at the line of fire in the spirit. She was terrified, but she made a choice. She dropped the things she was holding, the things that were tying her to the shadow, and she stepped fully into the light. As soon as she did, an angel appeared beside her, guarding her with a sword of light. The joy that flooded her face was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But then I saw a man who had been a leader in a church for 30 years. He was standing on the line, but he was looking back at the shadows. He loved the praise of men more than the approval of God. He chose to step back, away from the heat of the truth, into the comfortable dark, where he could keep his secrets and his pride. As he stepped back, the light around his name in the book went out. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. Jesus then led me to a vision of January 24th, 2026. This was the most quiet vision of all. I saw a moment in time where a great silence fell over the spiritual realm. It was as if every angel stopped singing and every demon stopped whispering. For 1 hour on that day, a massive, invisible wave of grace washed over the earth. It was a final loud call to the spirit of every human being alive. I saw people in prisons, people in palaces, people in hospitals, and people in the middle of a war. Everyone, at the exact same time, felt a sudden pull toward the Creator. It was a moment of absolute clarity. For that 1 hour, the noise of the world was pushed back. The mist I had seen earlier was parted. Every person knew without a doubt that God was real and that He was calling them home. "This is the silent call," Jesus whispered. "It is the moment where I pull back the curtain for everyone. No one will be able to say they did not know. No one will be able to say they weren't invited. This is the grace that precedes the closing of the door." I watched as the world reacted. I saw a man in a bar stop with a drink in his hand, his eyes filling with tears as he remembered a prayer his grandmother had taught him. I saw a scientist looking at a screen, suddenly overwhelmed by the beauty of the design of life, realizing he had been wrong to deny the designer. But I also saw people who felt the pull and grew angry. They grit their teeth and intentionally turned their minds to something else. They turned up their music, they started an argument, or they dove back into their screens to drown out the silence. The weight of that hour was incredible. It was like the whole world was holding its breath. I saw millions of people across the globe turn their hearts to Jesus in that 1 hour. It was a harvest of souls that made the angels weep with joy. But I also saw the millions who felt the light and chose to pull a blanket of darkness over their heads. When the hour ended, the mist rushed back in, thicker and darker than before. For those who rejected the silent call, their hearts became like stone. Jesus turned to me, and the light around him was so bright I had to shield my eyes. "The time is so short, Sarah. You see how they respond. You see how much I love them and how much it hurts when they turn away. January 24th is a day of mercy, but it is also a day that will seal the fate of many. After the silence, the noise will return, and it will be louder than ever to keep them from thinking about what they felt. I saw the spiritual atmosphere of the earth change after that day. It felt electric, like a storm was about to break. The divisions were deeper, the light was brighter, and the dark was more aggressive. I saw angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back winds of judgment, waiting for a signal. They looked at Jesus, waiting for his word. He showed me visions of the days leading up to the end of the month. I saw people who had accepted the call beginning to change their lives. They were forgiving people they had hated for years. They were giving away their extra clothes and food. They were speaking about Jesus with a boldness that didn't care about what others thought. They were like torches walking through a dark forest. But I also saw the shadow people, the ones who had completely surrendered to the mist. They were becoming more filled with rage. They hated the light and everyone who carried it. I saw families splitting apart because some chose the light and others chose the dark. The world was becoming a place of extremes. Jesus took my hand and we began to rise higher. Below us, the earth looked like it was covered in a web of light and shadow, fighting for every inch of ground. "The door is moving, Sarah," he said. "The hinges are turning. I am showing you these dates so that when you return, you can tell them that I am not a God who hides. I am a God who warns. I am a God who calls. I am a God who waits until the very last grain of sand falls." I looked at the great clock again. There were only a few grains left. The pile at the bottom was so high it was touching the glass at the top. I realized that the time between the visions was shrinking. The events were happening faster and faster. I felt a sense of panic, wanting to grab the clock and turn it over to give everyone more time. But Jesus placed his hand on the glass. "The time is set by my Father," he said firmly. "My job is to save as many as will come. Your job is to tell them that the clock is real. Tell them about the shaking on the 15th. Tell them about the line on the 20th. Tell them about the silence on the 24th. Each day is a mercy. Each breath is a gift." The light began to shift toward a deep royal purple, and I knew we were approaching the final vision he had for me. The air felt colder, but not in a way that hurt. It was the coldness of a mountain peak, a place of high stakes and final decisions. I felt a deep, overwhelming love for my friends, my family, and even the strangers I had seen in the visions. I wanted them all to be where I was, standing in the safety of Jesus' presence. The visions had been so vivid that I felt like I had lived through those days already. I understood that these weren't just possibilities. They were the path the world was on. I saw how every small choice I had made in my life, every time I chose to be selfish, or every time I ignored God, had been a step toward the shadow, and I saw how his grace had been pulling me back the whole time, even when I was falling off that rock. "Are you ready to see the end of the month?" Jesus asked me. His voice was filled with a solemn power that made my soul tremble. "Are you ready to see the closing of the door?" I nodded, though I was shaking. I knew that what I was about to see would change me forever, and that I would never be able to go back to being the girl who didn't care. I was a witness now. The purple light deepened until it was the color of a midnight sky, but it was filled with stars that seemed to hum with a low, powerful vibration. I felt as if the weight of the entire world was pressing against my chest, not to crush me, but to show me the gravity of what was happening. Jesus still held my hand, and his grip was the only thing that kept me from being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what I was seeing. We were no longer looking at individual streets or houses. We were looking at the very edge of time itself. Then, the final date appeared, hanging in the void like a sentence written in lightning. January 30th, 2026. As soon as those numbers formed, I saw the door. It was more massive than anything I could describe. It stretched from the depths of the earth to the highest point of the heavens. It wasn't made of wood or metal. It was made of a substance that looked like liquid pearl and refined gold. It radiated a warmth that made my soul ache with the desire to step through it and never look back. This was the entrance to the place where every tear is wiped away, where there is no more death, no more pain, and no more shadows. I could hear the sound of a billion voices singing on the other side, a harmony so perfect that it made my heart feel like it was going to burst. But the door was moving. I watched the hinges, which were carved with the stories of every person who had ever lived. They were turning slowly, with a sound like a great mountain being moved. With every inch the door closed, the light spilling out onto the earth became a more intense, more focused beam. It was as if the invitation was being concentrated into one last desperate ray of hope. "Look at the threshold, Sarah," Jesus said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command that echoed through every atom of my being. I saw the crowds. There were millions of people gathered near the door. Some were running toward it with everything they had, throwing aside their heavy bags of gold, their expensive clothes, and their pride. They were falling to their knees and crawling toward the light, their faces reflecting the glory of what was ahead. I saw people of every age and every nation. I saw a man who had spent his whole life hating others, now weeping and begging for forgiveness as he reached for the threshold. I saw a woman who had been crippled by fear her entire life, now standing tall and walking with a peace that surpassed anything the world could offer. But then I saw the others. There were so many people standing just outside the reach of the light. They weren't running. They were arguing. I saw some pointing at the door and laughing, calling it a trick of the light or a natural phenomenon that could be explained by science. They were busy taking measurements and talking about how the door didn't fit into their way of thinking. They were so caught up in their own intelligence that they couldn't see the reality staring them in the face. I saw others who were looking at the door with a strange kind of boredom. They saw it, but they thought they had more time. They were making plans for February. They were talking about summer vacations and career moves. They saw the door closing, but they convinced themselves that it would stop, or that there would be another door later. They were waiting for a more convenient time to decide. "They think the sun will always rise on their terms," Jesus said, and his sorrow was so thick I could almost taste it. "They treat my grace like a common thing they can pick up at a store whenever they feel the need. But the season of the invitation is reaching its final second. On January 30th, the period of the open gate will reach its end. Those who are inside will be mine forever, and those who chose the outside will have their choice honored." The door moved another few inches. The sound of the hinges was louder now, a deep thud that vibrated through the ground. I saw the mist from the first vision rushing in to fill the space where the light was disappearing. As the door closed, the darkness on the other side became deeper, more aggressive. It was a cold, empty void that seemed to swallow anything that wasn't anchored in the light. I saw a group of people who had spent their lives in church, but their hearts were like the dry mirrors I saw before. They were standing near the door, showing off their good deeds like they were tickets. They were pointing to the times they had given money or the times they had been seen praying. They expected the door to stay open just for them because of how they looked to others. But as the light hit them, I saw their hearts were hollow. They didn't love Jesus. They loved the idea of being good. When the door moved again, they began to panic. But even then, they didn't turn to him. They just tried to push others out of the way to get closer. "It is not about what you have done, but about whom you have known," Jesus said. He looked at me, and I felt the weight of his words. "I am the door. There is no other way. I do not ask for their records. I ask for their surrender. On the 30th of this month, the time for surrender will be replaced by the time of the seal." I saw the spiritual mark I had seen in the earlier visions. The people who were heading toward the door had a seal of fire on their foreheads, a name written in the light of heaven. The people staying behind had a mark of shadow. As the door grew closer to the frame, the marks became permanent. It was as if the very nature of their souls was being locked in place. I watched a young man who was literally inches from the threshold. He was looking back at a pile of gold coins that had fallen from his pocket. He was hesitating. He looked at the beauty of the door, then back at the gold. The shadow was creeping up toward his feet. I wanted to scream at him to leave the money and jump through the opening. I watched his face as the choice tore him apart. At the last moment, He reached back for the coins, and as his fingers touched the cold metal, the shadow swallowed him. He was still standing right there, but he could no longer see the door. He was blind to the light that was only an inch away. I began to cry, great shaking sobs that felt like they were coming from the center of my soul. It's too many, Jesus. There are too many people staying outside. Please, can't the door stay open just a little longer? Just one more day? Jesus turned me to face him. His expression was a mix of infinite love and a terrifying holy justice. Sarah, I have waited for 2,000 years. I have sent my spirit into every corner of the earth. I have been mocked, ignored, and pushed aside, yet I kept the door open. I have endured the pain of seeing my children choose their own destruction day after day. But my Father is a God of order and truth. There must be a conclusion to the night so the morning can begin. The door does not close because I am cruel. It closes because the time of the shadow is over. This is why I am sending you back. You are a voice in the final hour. Suddenly, the vision of the door began to spin. The royal purple light turned into a blinding white, and I felt a sensation of falling. Not the terrifying fall from the mountain, but a purposeful, rapid descent. The sound of the heavenly singing faded, replaced by the harsh, rhythmic beeping of a machine and the smell of antiseptic and cold air. The transition was violent. 1 second I was in the presence of the King of Kings, and the next, the weight of my broken body hit me like a freight train. I gasped, air rushing into my lungs with a burning sting. My chest felt like it had been crushed under a boulder. Every nerve in my body was screaming in pain. I heard voices, frantic and loud. "We have a pulse. She's back. Get the doctor." I tried to open my eyes, but the light in the room felt like needles. I wanted to shout about the door, about the 30th, about the mist and the gold, but I could only produce a weak, raspy groan. I felt hands on me, cold and clinical. I felt the sharp prick of a needle as they gave me something for the pain. As I drifted into a forced sleep, the last thing I saw was the clock on the hospital wall. It was January. The days that followed were a blur of physical therapy and confused looks from my doctors. They told me I had suffered a traumatic brain injury and multiple broken bones. They said I was lucky to be alive, that my heart had stopped for nearly 5 minutes. I listened to them talk about oxygen deprivation and near-death hallucinations, but I knew better. No hallucination leaves you with a heart that beats for the souls of strangers. No dream gives you specific dates that feel like fire in your bones. I tried to tell my parents first. My mom just cried and held my hand, telling me she was so glad I was okay. My dad looked at the floor, his face tight with a mix of relief and skepticism. He told me that the mind does strange things when it's under stress. I saw my friends, and when I tried to explain the great disconnect and the screens, they laughed and said I just needed a break from TikTok. They looked at me with a kind of soft compassion, the way you look at someone who isn't quite all there anymore. But I can't stop. I see the date every time I look at a calendar. It is January 7, 2026 today. I have 4 days until the first mark he showed me. I have less than a month until the door closes. I'm not the girl who rolls her eyes at the Bible anymore. I'm not the girl who cares about being popular or having the perfect climbing gear. I am a girl who has seen the end of the month. I have seen the face of the one who made the stars, and I have felt his tears for a world that won't look up. If you are reading this, I don't care if you think I'm crazy. I don't care if you think this is just a story to help me deal with my accident. I know what I saw. I know that the gray mist is real. I know that the foundations are shaking. I know that the line is being drawn and the silent call is coming. Most of all, I know that on January 30th, something is going to happen in the spirit that cannot be undone. The fairy tale isn't Jesus. The fairy tale is the life you're living right now, if you think you have forever. The fairy tale is thinking that your money, your looks, or your busy schedule will save you when the hinges of eternity turn for the last time. Jesus is waiting. He is standing by that door right now, his hand reached out, his heart breaking for you to just take one step toward him. He doesn't want your perfection. He doesn't want your lists of good deeds. He just wants your heart before the shadow takes it. Please look at your life. Look at the people around you. Look at the screens in your hands. Is any of it worth missing what's on the other side of that door? I have heard the music. I have felt the warmth. There is nothing on this earth, no amount of gold, no amount of fame, no amount of comfort, that is worth being left in the dark. I am 16 years old, and I died on a mountain. I was given a second chance, not so I could live a normal life, but so I could tell you that the time is up. The grain of sand is falling. The light is narrowing. As soon as Jesus spoke the final warning, the vision before me changed for the last time. I saw the world as it is right now, vibrant, messy, and distracted. But now I see it with his eyes. I see the ticking clock over every head. I see the love that is being offered and the love that is being rejected. I have done my job. I have told you what I saw. I have given you the dates. Now the choice is yours. January is moving forward. The 11th, the 15th, the 20th, the 24th, and finally the 30th. Each day is a beat of his heart, a final call to come home. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. And the door is moving. Please, don't wait for February. There may not be a February for the soul that waits too long. Turn to him now, while you still have the breath to say his name. The invitation is still open, but the sun is setting. By the end of this month, many choices will be fixed forever. Tell them that my arms are open, but they must run to me now. Do not wait for a tomorrow that is not promised.